Oh, I'm so full. 5 chimichangas. That was a mistake. Hi, I'm Gruffus. Welcome to Puppet Tabletop. And today we're going to be taking a look at Defenders of the Wild. Yeah, no, I'm starting to get the meat sweats. Have you ever wondered what would happen if Skynet took place in a world filled with magical critters instead of humans? Well, you don't have to imagine it. Instead, you can just play Defenders of the Wild. In Defenders of the Wild, 1 to 4 players will become leaders of their own faction of critters, and join forces to cooperatively defend the Commonwood from a machine invasion. At the beginning of the game, you'll be building this board using various region tiles, as well as placing down some not-so-good things that you'll have to deal with once the game starts. Then, each player will have to decide which faction they want to be the leader of. There's the Order, a faction of historians and bookworms that are a bit too much into fire. They're kind of like that weird kid in your neighborhood growing up who was always playing with his dad's lighter, but if they grew up and got really into books. Then there's the Council. These do-gooders are a collection of farmers and civil servants that value freedom, fairness, and altruism. They're your one-dimensional good guys. There's also the Coven, a faction of rogues and witches that like to ambush folks and experiment with herbs and mushrooms. For medicinal purposes, of course. Lastly, there's the Sect. This is a reclusive bunch of gearheads, techies, and mathematicians that live in the mountain tunnels like a bunch of mole people. Each of these factions comes with 2 leaders to choose from that will determine the cards that form your defender deck. Once you've got your faction and defender deck all set up, it's time to start saving the wild. At the beginning of each round, each player secretly selects a defender card from their hand and places it face down. The reason for this is because even though the players are working together, the various factions they represent have a long history of mistrust with each other, and as a result, they can't coordinate strategy until after they've decided which plan of action to take. Once all players have a face-down defender card in front of them, they all reveal their cards. Once these cards are revealed, the players can now begin discussing strategy with each other. And these defender cards are important for 3 main reasons. They determine the number of actions you can take, usually will give you a special ability, and each defender has a preferred habitat on the board. On your turn, you'll be taking a number of actions, choosing from the list of actions on your player aid card. You can move around, clear pollution from the board, fight machines, and more. You can also play any additional cards from your hand with a matching habitat type to the one you just played in order to give yourself additional actions on your turn. Once you've finished taking all of your actions, it's now your turn to reveal a machine card. These cards are almost always bad and do a number of things. They can activate engines, which are large indestructible machines moving around the board, dumping out factory walls, making it harder for you to move. They can cause the factory core in the center of the board to spit out factory tiles into any hex that is completely surrounded by walls. And these new factories come with 2 built-in sniper machines that shoot at you when you get near them. They can cause hunter machines to spawn and chase down the players. And they can cause factories to pump out pollution into the surrounding hexes. So, what does this mean for you? Well, all of these things contribute towards you and your teammates losing the game. Every time a hex gains 3 pollution, it becomes a toxic site, making it harder to clear. Too many toxic sites, you lose the game. Anytime you try to take an action in a space that has a machine in it, you may potentially take damage. Take too much damage, and you're going to have to kill one of the defenders in your hand. If the players ever collectively have 2 dead defenders from the same habitat, you lose the game. And lastly, if you ever need to place a new factory on the board, and you can't, you lose the game. So how do you win the game then? Well, every time you take certain actions in the game, you gain support. Destroy a machine, gain a support. Clean pollution, gain a support. Breach a wall, gain a support. Whenever your support tracker reaches the highest available space on your faction board, you can take the Build Camp action. This action increases your maximum hand size, lets you redraw to a full hand, and place a camp from your faction board onto the player board. Once you've finished building your final campsite, your faction retreats from the board. Having done their part, all the remaining players are left to finish out the game. This process of building out all of your campsites, though, is only half of what you need to win the game. In order to win the game, you also have to rewild every factory tile that's been distributed from the factory core. Rewilding is the process of clearing out a factory and allowing it to be reclaimed by nature. After all factory tiles have been rewilded, and every player has built their final camp, only then have you successfully defended the wild and won the game. So, what did I like about Defenders of the Wild? Well, I liked a lot about it. First off, the presentation in this game is just top-notch. The character art is fantastic on the cards, the colors on the board pop, and the meeple and wooden bits are probably some of the best that I've seen in recent memory. Additionally, this game manages not to fall into one of the most common issues with co-op games. A lot of the time in co-op games, there's this turn structure where a player takes a turn, then you reveal a card from an event deck that adds some negative effects to you or the board. This is fine, except that in larger player counts, this results in you kind of just sitting there and waiting for your turn while all of this bad stuff is happening in between everybody else's turn, and there's not really much that you can do to mitigate it, or avoid it. In Defenders of the Wild, the bad stuff usually only happens when it's on your turn, so even though at the end of the turn you're still flipping over a machine card and negative things are coming out, there isn't much immediate impact to you on it. You don't really have to deal with the consequences of it until your turn starts. You only take damage in this game when you take actions in the same space as a machine. Therefore, you're not going to take any damage until your turn starts. Because you only take damage on your turn, you have complete and total control over the risks you want to take and when you take them. The game doesn't really arbitrarily dish out damage. And this makes full group sizes a lot less devastating than in other co-op games with similar mechanics. Additionally, I really like the thematic effect of factions not being able to communicate about what cards they're about to play. It adds fun tension to each round where when the cards are revealed, everybody sighs in relief or grunts in despair. It's a fun little moment that happens at the beginning of each round, and I really enjoyed it. Also, let me just say that a lot of people have been comparing this game to Spirit Island and Root. While those are fantastic games to be compared to, I have to say that comparing them to this does this game a little bit of a disservice. Other than the theme, this game doesn't really feel anything like Root. And while it shares the containment element from Spirit Island, it feels distinct enough that I don't really feel myself having to choose between the two in terms of which game I prefer. I think Defenders of the Wild is unique enough that it deserves the respect of standing on its own without that comparison. I also want to mention that this game is, it's pretty toy. Every time I've played this, winning or losing has come down to the absolute wire. The game is just remarkably well paced and gives you just the right amount of tension. The last thing that I want to bring up is the replayability here. It's bonkers. Because each faction has multiple leaders to choose from, that each have their own distinct feel and playstyle, the game feels different every time you play. The team composition and randomized board just adds to the replayability. The game does also have a built-in difficulty scaling mechanism in case you're having too easy of a time, but I don't know, I felt like the base game itself was already pretty challenging. This is not one of those games that just gets stale after a couple plays. So, what did I not like about it? First, I'd like to say that this is one of those games that definitely does increase in difficulty and play length the more players that you have. With 2 players, the game is pretty snappy. However, as more players are added, the game does start to get bogged down a little bit. Not only does it run longer, but it becomes more important that everybody is maximizing the efficiency of their turn. As a result, one person having an inefficient turn can make the difference between winning and losing. However, the faction boards do scale with player count, so at higher player counts, you have fewer camps that you need to build from your board. Overall though, I do feel like this game is just stronger at 2 or 3 players. Also, it's time to talk about the box. It's not awful, but it's not the best. It's literally just a box. Luckily, it's a small box though, so it keeps everything pretty tight inside. You don't have to worry about components bouncing around and getting damaged too much. But considering how beautiful this game is, I really wish that there was something a little bit more protective inside the box than just, well, a box. It's a small complaint, but it's just one of those oddly specific things that I care about. Also, it's worth mentioning that while the game is very straightforward, learning the rules and teaching it to new players can be a bit overwhelming. It's definitely one of those games where you're going to want to do a practice round or 2 and then reset the game. Also, not a major complaint, but, you know, something worth mentioning. And now for the solo mode, please welcome our resident solo reviewer, Mortimer.
Hey, Gruffus.
So how did you like the solo mode?
Solo mode in Defender of the Wilds is actually pretty solid. You play 2 factions at the same time, but using one hand for all the cards. Each turn, you pick one card and activate the corresponding faction. That means that unlike the normal game, you can activate the same faction multiple times in a row. Other than that, it pretty much plays exactly the same. And since the normal game is so engaging, the solo game is equally as engaging. I had a good time with the solo mode, and I imagine that anybody else interested in this game for the solo mode would also have a good time as well. If you primarily play games solo, definitely don't sleep on Defenders of the Wild. It's good. Also, while I have your attention,
That's enough, thank you, Mortimer.
can you stop cutting me off all the time?
Overall, I had a fantastic time with Defenders of the Wild. It's eye candy on the table, and it's a fun puzzle to solve with your friends. It feels epic without being overwhelming, and it does a great job of tying its theme to the mechanics. I'm always on board for another playthrough of this game, and will definitely be keeping it in my collection. Well, that's gonna do it for this one. As always, thanks for watching, and remember to shop at your local board game store if you can. Please tell me we're done. Oh, the chimichangas are killing me.